Hello, School Transportation Nation. I'm Tony Corpin, publisher, president of School Transportation News. Welcome to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. And we've got a great maintenance tip this week from Scraper Systems by Right Height, North America's leading rooftop snow removal machine for buses. Yeah, you got snow out there. They'll definitely be able to help you. And I'll be talking to Pam Caro, director of sales at Nuvve, a San Diego-based clean tech company helping schools intelligently electrify their fleets. And also be talking with their Mr. Ryan Gray. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how you doing, Tony?
Excellent.
A little bit later, I'm going to be sitting down with Derrick Agate, who just until recently was the transportation supervisor up in Hopkins School District in Minnesota and was a two-time president of the Minnesota Association for Pupil Transportation, the first Black president in the association's history. So it is Black History Month. So have a really great conversation with him lined up.
Excellent. Yeah, I love Derrick. We always got to hang out at the Transporting Students with Disabilities Conference. He was always a regular. So hopefully we'll see him out at the conferences this summer or maybe in the fall. We do have STN Expo. Registration's now open for Indy. You can save $200 with our super early bird discount. And we're opening up STN Expo Reno as well. There you can save $300 with the super early bird. If you guys go check out stnexpo.com and then the Transporting Students with Disabilities Conference. If you didn't get the memo, we moved the dates. We pushed it back to November. It's the 8th through the 12th of November. You can go to tsdconference.com for more details on that one as well. So excited for that, Ryan. We got lots of big headlines, but before we jump into that, want to talk to you a little bit about something from TransFinder. Guys, are you struggling with driver shortages, retaining drivers having to quarantine because of COVID, vaccine mandates? It's crazy times out there. And TransFinder, you know what? They hear you. They hear you guys. And they want to help you not have to deal with hiring replacement drivers. Because you know what? It's critical that you've got drivers when you need them, when emergencies pop up. Hey, guess what? Route Finder Plus with trip absorption has a function that comes in really handy. You can reduce routes and use fewer drivers to adapt to the changing climate of the situation. Like an NFL team, we just watched the Super Bowl, didn't we? You got to get out the playbook in real time and make the changes that you need to make. TransFinder's technology helps give you control when conditions change on the field so you can make strategic decisions that will reduce the impact to your families and teams. Hey, check out Plus with trip absorption because the driver shortage is no game. Learn more at getplus@transfinder.com. And don't forget to type in STN podcast in the subject line when you email them so they know we sent you. You can also give them a call at 800-373-3609 to learn more. All right, Ryan, we got some big topics this week, headlines as well. I know there was a shooting last week in Minnesota. In fact, there were two shootings that happened in the same week, which is kind of an odd one. One on a school bus and the other one, I believe, with a student that maybe was crossing the street. Do we have any more details on that?
Yeah, it actually happened last Wednesday on the same day, within like 2 hours of each other. So there's been an uptick that we've been tracking in a lot of shootings around bus stops. And folks in Minnesota, we wrote an article a couple months ago talking about concern there that bus drivers were having because of seemingly an increase in violence around bus stops. Well, a school bus driver was shot in the head while on board the bus with 3 students. This is according to the Minneapolis Police Department. The bus driver was believed to be okay in terms of it wasn't life-threatening. So that's good news. No other kids were injured. No indication yet of how that happened, if it was just a stray bullet. The driver was targeted. But 2 hours before that, a 15-year-old boy was shot, a member of the high school football team at North Community High School in the Minneapolis area. And a suspect fled on foot and was in extremely critical condition. So it just, again, it's a reminder to be vigilant out there. It's, So much has been said about the effect of COVID on mental health, and then there's just plain old crime. We've seen a school bus driver stabbed earlier this school year up in Washington State. Certainly led to, I think, some really good content at our conferences this summer. Working on that right now with a couple of different folks who are security experts and have been working on security programs with regard to school buses. So just be vigilant out there, be safe, keep your head on a swivel. If you see something, say something.
Yeah, great advice, Ryan. Yeah, tragic stuff. And it just kind of points a bright light. Again, staying vigilant, staying mindful. Anything can happen at any moment. There's uncertainty out there. And, it's just tragic to get those kind of headlines. And, other kind of things out there in the news, Ryan, I know there's been a ton of discussion about the mask mandates and, will it impact schools? Will it not? Every state is a little bit different. I mean, obviously in California, we're kind of on the more aggressive end of the spectrum of mask wearing, where other places aren't. And I think Governor Newsom was lightening up that in some areas, but not in others, depending on the counties. How's that looking out there for schools? Do we have any updates there?
Well, we had several schools last week announce that they are ending face masks for their students. Delaware and New Jersey, Massachusetts. Massachusetts is at the end of this month, next week. In fact, February 28th. New Jersey is going to let its current mandate expire March 7th, and Delaware is going to let its expire at the end of March 31st, at about 11:59 p.m. there Eastern time. So we've seen Connecticut. Their governor said that he's backing a plan to end the mandate for school masks there, but that one has to go to legislation. So seems like there's going to be some work to be done on that one. But definitely seeing these mandates relax. I mean, in a lot of quote unquote blue states as well. We've been talking about it, Tony, that there will be a point, and I think it's going to be coming sooner rather than later, where we officially enter endemic world with regard to COVID.
Aren't we there, Ryan? I feel like we're there. Is anybody else not thinking?
Yeah, I think, I think that, we have to, like I said, officially, I don't think, the powers that be have not come out and said that. I think a lot of us are certainly living like that. I know my family and I we're living as if it's endemic. I think that's where the smart money goes. But, until we see more and more states relax their mandates, just in general. So I know that, for example, you were referencing it earlier with California, but still Los Angeles County, they're staying pat with their mask mandates for all of us indoors, going to the mall and going to restaurants and whatnot, while the rest of the state is opening up. So, slowly but surely we're getting there. That, and I think certainly as we get closer to the spring months, we're going to see more and more of those dominoes fall. And I think this will be the norm going forward. Like I've been mentioning in past podcasts, that wintertime, hey, people are going to get sick. They're going to get COVID. They're going to get the flu. They're going to get, whatever. We have hay fever season in the spring. It's just going to be part of our everyday experience.
Yeah, other big kind of transportation headlines that caught my eye is I did see that the EPA had released that initial report on the $5 billion clean school bus program. You want to break that down? I know Taylor Hannon has a great article on stnonline.com about it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they've basically said in a report to Congress last month that initial funding is going to be in the form of a rebate, and we should be getting information on that released likely in April. And then later in the year, there will be a competitive grant. So, again, a lot of this money, first of all, it's going, 40% of it has to be going to disadvantaged communities. And then, this money will, they're saying, cover the cost. It should cover the overall cost of bus replacement. It's going to consider, that cost. It's going to consider the local conditions, including length of bus routes and weather conditions, impact on manufacturing jobs, and technologies that can, work together to reduce the most emissions. So I think that a lot of people are licking their lips. So we should be here in the next, month and a half seeing the first of that money released.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. I know I'm talking with Pam Caro here in just a little bit, and she's going to dive into that topic as well, as Nuvve is a company that kind of is in that V2G space. So excited for that conversation too. Well, Ryan, I don't know about you, but I mean, this last Super Bowl weekend had a blast, but it was hot, man. But I know back east, everybody's been hit heavily with snow and cold weather and ice, and that cannot be any fun. And guys, if you have that issue, this maintenance tip is for you. And it's brought to you by Scraper Systems by Right Height, North America's leading rooftop snow removal machine for buses. Scraper System fleet plows automate the removal of rooftop snow from school buses and passenger vans, giving you a safer and more efficient method for removing snow, eliminating the need for teams of workers to manually clear snow using roof rakes and brushes. It's designed to be faster, effortless, low maintenance operation. In harsh winter conditions, one person can remove up to 12 inches of snow in less than 30 seconds with the simple push of a button. With Scraper Systems by Right Height, you can reduce labor required to remove that rooftop snow while helping prevent employee injuries as well. Select from different fleet plow models to get the right snow removal solution you need for your fleet. You can go to their website, scrapersystems.com, for more information. That's scrapersystems.com. All right, I'm talking to Pam Caro from Nuvve coming up next. All right, guys, super excited to have our next guest on, Pam Caro of Nuvve. She's going to talk to us a little bit about kind of what Nuvve does, how and what that means to you guys, and why you should know Nuvve. So, Pam, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thank you. Excited to be with you guys today.
Excellent. So can you give us a little background? What does Nuvve do? Who are you? Your name seems to be popping up more and more lately with around the green bus conversation. So break it down for us a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nuvve, we were actually at STN this past year, so excited to see folks in the school transportation sector. So thank you for having us. So what Nuvve does in a nutshell is we work with school bus OEMs to enable vehicle to grid. And you hear that word V2G. And so what that means is essentially is that a school bus now that is a zero emission bus not only transports students during the day, but now we have this technology through Nuvve and with the bus OEMs to not only just charge the vehicle for transportation during the day, but to actually discharge. So again, vehicle to the grid, for example, emergency power situations, or to power a school cafeteria so that the food doesn't go bad. Send energy back to the grid, because we know that buses have a set schedule and routes, and typically down in the summer. So they're a perfect example that not just for transporting during the day, but to actually do energy and send it back when it's needed most in our community. So we're very excited to work with school bus OEMs and with school districts to have a zero emission vehicle and a vehicle to grid charging station. So yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so I know I hosted a webinar with Nuvve a while back about a school district project you were doing down in San Diego. And, you know, California, we're always a hotbed for green energy and electrification. And there's a lot of grant money that have come out. Are there any like new projects you're working on right now that you could share with the audience about how you're engaging with the school district or a contractor? And what does that process look like? Because you talked about working with OEMs, but if I'm a school district transportation director, how do I interface with Nuvve? What's the value there? How do I get to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work directly with the school districts. I'm glad that you brought that up. So a school district will say, hey, Nuvve, you know, we are getting a bus. Maybe we need funding. Can you help us out with that? So we can definitely provide grant support. So we have a full-time dedicated team that will dig through funding resources available in your state, in your city, in your area district, and let you know what's coming and making sure that we unlock that funding. So we definitely help you unlock and secure that funding for the bus and for the infrastructure. And so some of the current projects that we have done this with is, for example, San Diego Unified, one of the largest school districts in the state of California. They are getting EV buses, but they're also working with us. So we provide level 2 chargers and our DC vehicle to grid charging stations. And that's breaking ground today. We're also working with other school districts like LA Unified. They're getting their buses. So we'll be providing the infrastructure and the chargers there for them. So we work with them from the very beginning to say, what is your timeline? When are the buses arriving? And then we help and we work with your utility to make sure we try to target that timeline. So when that bus is there, your charging station is there, your infrastructure is ready to go. So we have projects, for example, in cold climates too, right? We know California has funding, but across the country, more states are wanting to go EV. So Colorado, for example, we have the first vehicle to grid charging station coupled with a Bluebird bus at Durango School District. But we have other school districts, right? In Colorado, Steamboat Springs, Buena Vista, and all over the country, and not just the warm SoCal climate, but also in hilly terrain and in cold climate as well.
So now the big conversation has kind of shifted to the infrastructure bill that is now a law, right? So $5 billion allocated over the next 5 years. A big component of that is school bus electrification. On top of that money is infrastructure money as well. So not only is that $5 billion, but there's more for infrastructure. Can you talk a little more about how Nuvve kind of sees the impact of that legislation and what that really means for school districts and contractors over the next, 5-year period that this money is going to start rolling out? What is really the implications of that? What should people start thinking about? Because this is coming and, are we ready?
Absolutely. And it's funny because we actually have a school district that reached out to us in Arizona that told us, hey, Nuvve, right now I don't have funding for EVs, but I know this is coming. How can we prepare? So he shared about his long-term goals of how many buses he wants to convert to electric. We took a look at his current infrastructure on site to start evaluating the costs that are going to be needed to convert his fleet to electric. And so yes, the infrastructure bill is coming. And a lot of times we hear funding for school buses. But a lot of times we don't talk about funding for the infrastructure. A lot of our sites, a lot of school districts, the upgrade is needed there to support EVs, especially if you're going to have more than 5 to 10 EVs. And so there is about $7.5 billion for electric charging stations. And that's something that Nuvve does is we work with any school district that's interested and says, can you help me? We're busy with transporting students. Maybe I'm a driver now during the day. I don't have time to make sure I'm ready for that deadline. And so Nuvve has a list for each state to say, hey, this is your funding available and let's apply for this together. And additionally, I will say that the infrastructure bill did mention vehicle to grid and the benefits with that. So definitely see that coming your way also.
Excellent. Now, you talked a lot about funding. So a lot of states, they get their CapEx budget and it's for diesel buses, right? And that's what they're given. That's what they're allocated. That's all they're given. And they're like, okay, how do we bridge the gap and get to EV that costs 2-3x more than what diesel does? So I know you have another company called Levo. Can you explain a little bit how that kind of bridge financing works for school districts?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're excited. So Nuvve and Levo were the same entity together. And what Levo does is help districts, fleets electrify in a simple and a confident way. So we focus on school buses. And again, if we have a customer that says, I only have X amount of dollars to buy, this school bus, well, how do I offset the rest? And so we evaluate the needs of the customer. We evaluate the infrastructure with our project managers that we have within Levo and Nuvve, and then we offer that financing with no upfront costs in a leasing model. And we're actively doing this today with several school districts that have maybe little funding, and then to offset the remaining that with the Levo support so that districts don't have to come out of pocket, especially who are budget conscious, right? So we work together as a team and provide those custom proposals so that we can present that to the school district.
Excellent. So if I'm a district and I'm looking to find out more about Nuvve's services and Levo's services, how do I get a hold of you, Pam?
Yeah, really simple. Just reach out to us at sales@nuvve.com. That's sales@nuvve.com, sales@nuvve.com, and we're happy to help you out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit about this new EV revolution that's happening in the school bus industry. Exciting times for sure.
Thanks, Tony, and we look forward to seeing you at STN soon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. All right, guys, Ryan Gray's talking to Derrick Agate coming up next.
Welcome to the stage, Derrick Agate. Derrick, a lot of folks know of you, formerly with Hopkins Schools in Minnesota, recently retired, two-time Minnesota Association for Pupil Transportation president. Derrick, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Ryan, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on talking to you. My voice sounds a little bit different today because, I had a procedure this morning and it's, so it's I call it my Barry White voice. How's that?
What a trooper. Derrick was telling us before he had a little bit of a procedure done. And so, it was a little hoarse. I told him that we try to make this less painful than the procedure. How's that? So Derrick, I was just mentioning you were a two-time MAPT president. I think your term just ended. Your second term, or your most recent term, just ended last year. You're still on the board, though, right?
Yes, I am. Past president, sitting on the board. I get to run the elections until our current president actually rolls off. Mm-hmm. So, it's just been an honor to do that, and it's a great organization that is there for the safety of kids and the knowledge of bus drivers.
And you were with Hopkins Schools, so I mentioned that. How long have you been in student transportation? Tell us a little bit about your background, your start in the industry.
Yeah, I've been in student transportation for over 22 years. It's kind of different how not different, how I started into the school transportation business. I was actually between jobs, and a friend of mine asked me if I would come in to be a interim director at a former school district. I agreed to do that while I was looking for another position. I had my CDL previously because I drove a truck and had to take the license and got the CDL, and no one really knew that. So when I stepped into that position, I realized that a lot of the skills that I had is transferable to school bus driving, except for the school bus endorsement. But that did not take me very long to learn about the school bus endorsement and the safety, of our students. And then the position came available. I applied for it and got to be the director of transportation for Eden Prairie Schools.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into more on school bus drivers and some of the training you do and some of your philosophy. But also, I wanted to talk about it being Black History Month. And for folks out there that don't know Derrick, he alluded to Barry White a little bit earlier. He is Black and was the first Black president of the state association there in Minnesota. We don't know what other states have done off the top of my head. I can't think of other folks in the industry who have been Black, certainly some other people of color, but certainly a trailblazer in that respect in Minnesota. And so, Derrick, I wanted to, get your thoughts on leadership, and especially it being Black History Month, and for your peers out there who are Black, maybe even coming up in the industry. It's a conversation that we were talking about earlier. We shouldn't be having, but we are. It's just the reality of it. So I know you've encountered some things throughout your career, learned some lessons, taught some lessons. Can you provide some more insights on being a Black man in transportation in the United States and kind of how that shaped you?
Mm-hmm. Ryan, thanks for that. When I came into the industry and I would attend and go to national conferences, I did not see a lot of people who looks like me. Now, more specifically in Minnesota, in our public school systems, there were not a lot of Black transportation director. Matter of fact, for years, I was the only one that I knew of, and that would show up to our state meetings. I wanted to make sure that that I was a good example, for all the Black professionals to enter the industry. Dr. Martin Luther King, we celebrated his birthday last month, and I give our country a lot of credit for celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In other countries throughout the world, when you think about it, they don't have national birthdays for quote unquote ordinary citizens. It's for presidents, it's for kings, it's for queens, it's for all and here in the United States we have a day set aside for a Black man that made a difference in this country's history. So I admire Dr. Martin Luther King for that. And in his speech, I Have a Dream, he talks about that he did not want his kids to be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So as I pressed on for my career, there's some things that happened to me. And Ryan, some of these things are not like, they're hard to talk about, but I came out of my office and I started hiring more drivers of color in my department. And I came out of my office one day and there was a gorilla hanging there in a striped jumpsuit, and the noose was around the gorilla's neck. Now, I'm telling you, you can only deduce one thing from that, there. And so some of our drivers just did not understand and accepted a Black transportation director. And they even came up to me and said it. A driver walked into my office one day and, accused me of being a Muslim because the district came up with a policy that they did not want the drivers to decorate their buses for Christmas. I had to be the deliverer of that news, and then I was the one that took the backlash for it. Now, it's not here nor there. I did not respond to the driver because it didn't really matter. I'm a Christian man, proud of it, but at that point, it didn't matter what, I was or was not. The fact that he felt enough nerve to come in and walk and just say that I wanted to take away Christmas when it's not even a transportation decision. And that's where, support, when a decision is made and had to carry out that decision, that's when administration needed to come back and support, because it is very difficult being a Black transportation director. It was for me, because my white colleagues could make the same exact decision I did, and the reaction from people were totally different, from that. And so the Dr. Martin Luther King speech that resonated with me and kept me going is being judged by the content of my character, not by the color of my skin. And so I worked really, really hard and wanted to make a difference and wanted to blaze the path for other Black professionals to enter our industry, despite some of the challenges I had.
Thanks for sharing. Really appreciate that. It's so hard for some of us we obviously can't physically walk in some other people's shoes or know what it's like, but we need to hear those stories to know that they do happen and how they affect people. And, as you were talking about kind of that experience, and I was thinking of the recent census data. And I shared this with the team last month that and I was surprised by this, that, when you're looking at school bus drivers and a lot of this industry, certainly that get to the transportation director role, and not in your case specifically, but a lot of folks have that history of they started driving in college. Right. And they were going down one path and they stayed in transportation, and now they're a leader, one of the leaders in their district. Well, according to the most recent census data, only 8.6% of school bus drivers are classified as Black or African American. Mm-hmm. Does that surprise you, number one? And number two, if those numbers are so low, that obviously right there makes it extremely difficult to tap into that segment of the population, that segment of school bus drivers, to be the leaders of tomorrow, doesn't it?
yes, it does, Ryan. And I've seen a lot of Black professionals over the years, but they don't stay in the industry. And so part of it is asking myself, why are they in the industry? And that number is low, for a reason. The industry is not very welcoming to people of color. And we just have to call it out. We have to address it, and we have to ask, what can we do about that? I mean, that is a low percentage. So you look at the driver pool for bus drivers, and then the management pool for management, and there's a huge disparity of managers of color in our industry nationwide as compared to drivers of color in our industry. And that's, again, I've developed kind of a thick skin to want to make a difference, to be that difference in our industry.
Absolutely. And part of that census data too, those who classify as Hispanic or Latino, that's only 13.7%. So, 5.1 or so percentage points higher than Black and African American. But still, I mean, when you're talking about, a quarter or really less than that, almost 20% of school bus drivers are people of color, yet they are, a lot of times in a lot of communities, they're driving student population that looks a lot like them. So if we have disparate numbers and we're driving a lot of students and children with color, but there's a disconnect there that I think we can, as an industry, do better on. So I don't know if there's a way to we can't solve that today, Derrick. But in terms of the driver shortage, though, do you have any thoughts on recruitment, going out into communities and sharing the story about what a career in student transportation can do for you?
Yeah. And I've had some fantastic drivers over the years. I had a driver that recognized and saw that families, the students that she was transporting were coming on the bus kind of lethargic in the morning, not doing very, very well. She took it upon herself to start buying groceries, more so like breakfast stuff for that family. She recognized that one of the students were getting teased, and she, his hair, we have a terminology called nappy head, and he needed a haircut. She took her time, spoke to the mom, picked up that student, took him and got him a haircut. That student's entire demeanor changed because now, he's fed, he looks better. I got a call from the mother, so I didn't know what transpired. And I picked up the phone, and the mom asked for me specifically. I took the phone and talking to her, and then she started telling me what a school bus driver and the difference that school bus driver made for her kids and her family. She said, I don't know how you get these drivers. And then she's the one that told me the story. Now, I thought she's going to be mad and start yelling. She started crying because it made such a difference for her and her family. And that's a school bus driver. I have school bus drivers. They've gotten invited to graduations for students that they transported. Some of them have even gotten invited to students' wedding, years later. I had a driver, and she would sing a song on the bus every morning. We were going to graduation, going down to graduation, and the kids were being very unruly on the bus. And it was raining, the bus was fogging up, and I was riding on that bus. She started singing the song that she would sing to the kids, the entire time that she transported them. And here are seniors. They quieted down and started singing her song. I was blown away. She didn't yell. And then she started calling some of the kids by name. And they're like, oh, Miss R, you remember me. And it meant so much to those, to those students. So one of the things I think our population need to hear of those stories. And I think that the parents need to know the significant impact and difference that they could make by being a school bus driver. It's a passion. Those students are the school bus driver is the first person they see at the beginning of the day. And for a lot of them, it's the last person they see at the end of the day. And so a driver has the ability to impact and make a positive impact on our scholars' lives. And I think if we would send those messages out, people would respond to those types of messages. But what do you always hear? Bus driver took the wrong road, or a student was on the bus until 9 o'clock at night. You hear a lot of the negative stories, but I'm telling you, there are 100 positive stories to every negative stories that we hear, but we never hear about them. And I think that would make a difference in our industry.
And, what shaped your experience is your own story of coming up and people who made a difference in your life. You want to share a little bit of that too?
Yeah, in telling this story, Ryan, I'm going to talk about myself, right? I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, West Indies. So I'm a first generation, immigrant to this country. Went to elementary school, and I spoke patois in Jamaica and was not able to transcend that. So I always got kicked out of classes when I was in elementary school. Fast forward, I'm in 9th grade in high school, and I had this teacher, and he would say, "Agate, do your work." I said, "I'm finished." He said, "Bring it up here." So I bring it up to him. He'd give me another paper, and then he said, "Agate, do your work." I was picking on the kids, Ryan. I'm not saying I was a saint because I was, and that's why. And so after about 3 times, he gave me the paper. The 4th time, we do it again. He took me out of his class. Now, it generally takes about a couple months when I was in elementary school to get kicked out. And here's it in high school. I'm going, oh, it happens a lot faster now. But what he did was he took me down to the guidance counselor's office, and I was in his remedial math class. He told them, this kid doesn't belong in my class. And they put me in college prep class. What happened is I'd finish all the work he was giving me for the entire semester in his class. And he's like, I have nothing else to give him. And, that made a difference in my life. But here's what happened. I was now struggling. He went to every single teacher and say, this kid could do the work, and if he doesn't, you come and talk to me. This kid could do the work. If he doesn't, you come and talk to me. I did not like this man because now I was challenged, and now school is hard. School was never hard for me. That's why I was getting in trouble. So fast forward, I went out for wrestling, and he ends up being the wrestling coach. And we forged a relationship. He took on a mentor kind of father role, for me, and we are still close to this day. He and his wife took me in, Walter in Georgia, and they, look at me as their son. The thing is, all it takes to make a difference in a child's life is a culturally responsive, caring adult. That's what Walter in Georgia became, not even realizing that's what they were doing. And there's more stories, about that. But as an adult, as a school bus driver, as a teacher, all it takes is a culturally responsive, caring adult. Kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And once they know how much you care, they'll run through a brick wall for you. And hence, that's what I would do. Now, everyone would think of Walter in Georgia. Everyone would think of him when I tell that story as a black man. He's a short, bald-headed white dude, right? That made a difference in a black kid's life. Took me out of remedial math classes, care enough to say to the teachers he could do the work, and then followed up on it. I ended up wrestling for him later on, and we forged this relationship for 40 some odd years. We still are extremely, extremely close, all from one incident of caring for a child.
That's a beautiful story. And speaking of wrestling, I've known you for several years, Derrick, right? But I just recently learned of your wrestling prowess, and you were recently recognized for that.
Yeah, yes, it was, again, a proud thing. I didn't think I did anything, but I was recognized by the Minnesota Wrestling Coaches Association Lifetime Achievement Award to be entered into the Hall of Fame for over 30 years of coaching wrestling. And again, Ryan, what drives my passion is what Walter did for me. He said years and years ago when I was in college and I came back and I said, hey, you guys have done so much for me. I don't know how I could ever repay you. He goes, there's no repaying us. He said, we didn't do anything for you. You did a lot for us. You enrich our lives. You did. And so he goes, if you think I did that much for you, he goes, do it for other kids. And that was my battle cry, my passion for all those years. And fast forward, coaching for 30 years, getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, and didn't look at it as that I did that much, but I impacted a lot of lives.
Well, in Minnesota, that's wrestling's, hockey is big, is probably the biggest there, but wrestling, that's big time stuff in Minnesota too. So again, just goes to show that, you never know where those beginnings are going to come from. And to wrap this up, I think you have a really good analogy to share along those lines. Something about an apple.
Yeah, Ryan, I look at it this way. For me, the battle cry and my passion was to do and work for kids. And, I'll tie that into, CISO and them wanting to hit the hearts and organization, believe that every student deserves equitable learning journey. And that's what drives me, because they're taking some of the stuff that I've done over the years, and we're going to package it, and we're going to turn around and give some of those soft skills training back into our industry. Because if you look at an apple and you cut that apple apart, you could count how many seeds are in that apple. However, if you plant a seed of an apple, you have no idea how many apples are in that seed. Our school bus drivers can make a huge difference in the students' lives. Our teachers can make a huge difference. All they have to do is be that farmer and plant the seed. Plant that apple seed, and they have no idea how richly blessed they will become and the impact that they have on those students' lives. Now, I don't know every single student or wrestler or baseball player or football player that I've impacted, but I've had enough of them that are still around and still call me back. One of them was actually calling me during this podcast, and I think he was calling me to see how I was doing with my surgery. That's the lifelong impact that you could have. So you know how many seeds are in an apple, but you don't know how many apples in a seed. And so my challenge to everyone that's listening to this podcast, build that relationship, plant the seed, and then count the apples later on. You will be richly blessed and surprised of the impact that you can make.
And Derrick, you mentioned CISO. So what is that real quickly? Because you're doing consulting now?
Yeah, I tell people it's my retirement gig, but they're helping me pursue my passion for working for and improving, the lives of kids, especially, K-12. And I put together a number of presentation over the years for non-licensed staff for school districts. A lot of school districts, Ryan, we're talking about Black History Month, have embarked into the equity work and being more equity-centric. What I've realized from my experience, at some of these school districts, that the school district could do everything right. However, they ignore and forget about teaching and training the non-licensed staff. So I came up with this training, equity, diversity, training for non-licensed staff, specifically geared towards bus drivers, so they could understand the impact that they make. And so CISO will be taking that presentation, breaking it out into different modules, looking at our non-licensed staff so that we can help districts by helping their non-licensed staff so that the non-licensed staff doesn't derail the work that the district is doing. Because they're not doing it intentionally, they're doing it because they don't know any better. And so that's where, so CISO is a nationally known organization, consulting area of K-12, helping with operation and collaboration, and we'll be embarking on helping our K-12 districts with soft skills training and culturally responsive training for non-licensed staff specifically.
All right. Well, and so CISO is the Center for Effective School Operations. If you want to know more about them, it's theciso.com. Derrick, thanks so much. Really interesting stuff. Really enjoyed hearing your whole story there, and especially as we celebrate Black History Month, a lot of your accomplishments, but also knowing that we still have a lot to do as an industry and as a society. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm looking forward. I'm glad, still in the industry. And can I put a shameless plug for a blog that I'll be writing that STN will be
absolutely
publishing?
That's right. Yes. You heard it here, folks.
Yeah, I'm putting together a blog now. I'm not a writer extraordinaire. However, I felt it necessary and important, Ryan, to talk about. You said it earlier when we started this podcast. We shouldn't even be having this conversation, but we still are. I am not upset because I want to be a change agent. So my blog is about cultivating relationship, talking about my father-in-law and a lesson that he taught me that he didn't even realize he was teaching me, and then being a change agent. So that's a teaser.
Stay tuned.
So stay tuned for that blog. It's cultivating relationship, which would help us in our conversation with each other and being a change agent.
Absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to it, Derrick. It's always a pleasure catching up with you. We'll have to talk sports here a little bit. We talk a little basketball and wrestling and stuff. So we'll catch up on that, but we won't waste everybody's time here. I know no one wants to hear us drone on about that stuff. But Derrick, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. Have a great day.
You too.
Hey, special thanks to TransFinder, Nuvve, Scraper Systems. Appreciate you being a sponsor of this episode. Also, special thanks to Mr. Ryan Gray, co-hosting the podcast with me. Derrick Agate, thank you for being here. Great interview. And Pam Caro, thank you for sharing with us about green energy. Really interesting stuff. Guys, lots of great stories. STNonline.com for all your coverage of the school transportation industry, everything you need. We also got the upcoming conferences, STNexpo.com for all that information. Make sure and lock in that super early bird rate to save hundreds of dollars. We'd love to have you join us this summer. Hopefully you're off of school. Anybody? Maybe you are, I think. So no driver shortage when school's out. We'd love to see you there this summer in Reno or in Indianapolis. Guys, don't forget to tell your friends about the podcast. We'd love to have you listen. Share it amongst your community. Get it out to everybody in your operation. We hope it helps you kind of do your job better, be safer, more operationally efficient, give you a few great insights from professionals around the industry along the way. You can listen to the podcast on stnpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere where you listen to podcasts. And guess what? Next episode is going to be episode 100. You got to tune in for that. So we'd love to have you join us for celebrating the 100th episode. I can't believe we've been at it for that long, Ryan. It's unbelievable. So guys, we love you. We'll see you next week.